You guys ready?
Ready?
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 49 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, and I'm the webs programmer.
I'm Sam, and I make pictures.
Today is May 11th, 2016, and before we get started, we have a warning. Anything can happen on this show. There will be profanity for sure.
Guaranteed.
Probably a lot of other just truly awful, horrible things. So if you are young or a person, go away. Okay, so what's in the news for this week, guys?
Well, we've been doing a lot of R&D, as it's called, as it's referred to.
What does that stand for?
What does R&D stand for?
I think it's like research and dragons.
I think something about dragons. I'm pretty sure.
Raisins and dragons.
And all of us are kind of in a bit of an educational mode, trying to figure out how exactly to pull off what it is that we have planned for down the road. Because we always want to do sort of more interesting stuff going forward, and that's either within everybody's own solo domain. So in my case, making better art with better animations, or within like a general studio domain that one of us is responsible for. So in Adam's case, that'll be figuring out Node.js and doing server stuff, and then Seth has to figure out how to make multiplayer go. So we're all kind of hopping around on that, doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of thinking.
Yeah, if you're always doing the same thing, or what you're always comfortable doing, then it's super boring. And as we discussed last week, you die fast.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we gotta always keep it fresh. And I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what makes multiplayer such an interesting problem.
Well, yeah, people are constantly asking us, why not just make Crashlands multiplayer?
Yeah, well, here's why not. So we've been kind of playing around with networking for the prototype for our next game. And when you make a single player game, there's a lot of really straightforward stuff that you can do. For example, if you want a character to walk 10 pixels forwards, you just, do this like y plus equals 10. And then boom, that step, the character now is 10 pixels ahead, and everything in the game knows where that character is. But if you're doing multiplayer, then you actually have several unique versions of the game running on everybody's computers, and you can't just move that character. You have to tell a server that you want to move the character. And then that character has to be moved on everybody's machine at the same time. And then you have to account for things like you have a 200 millisecond ping, and if an enemy was throwing a bomb at that location, and that person would have dodged it with 0.2 of a second to spare, how do you make sure that they do dodge it even though they have a 0.2 of a second delay in communicating with the server, right? Or what if a command gets sent to the server and that command actually doesn't make it? There's that idea of dropping packets. And so even something really, really simple like having a character just walk around or walk across the screen all of a sudden becomes this really, really complicated technical problem that has lots of layers and just tons of different ways that things can go wrong. So you actually spend most of your time developing these kinds of fail-safe kinds of things.
It almost reminds me of like the various problems that come into play whenever you conceive of time travel as a system.
Yeah.
Right.
As soon as that element enters in where everyone's not operating on the same time scale, then stuff just gets really weird. And I've also had this with, I read this story, there's a psych story about this woman she got hit in the head really, really hard, of course, as many of these psych stories start.
That is how they all begin.
And some part of her brain that was responsible for stitching together events over time was sort of, askew after this or turned off. And so as a result, this concept of like having a lag or a frame rate, she no longer viewed things, even though she'd be sitting there like watching a road, for example, cars wouldn't, smoothly barrel down them. It was like every 40 steps, so to speak, every 40 frames or whatever, the car would jump between places. And every so often when I'm crossing the road or when I'm driving the car, I think about this and I'm like, what if right now I'm lagging? Because if I am, I'm going to die so hard. Well,
it is the case that
lag.
there's a very brief lag between the signal going from your eyeballs into the back of your brain and then getting processed into an image. It's almost instantaneous, but you know, it's
It's
not
a
quite.
few. I think it's a few milliseconds.
Yeah, it's very fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this idea of lag and lost information and stuff turns normally really easy things into really complicated things, and it makes it much more necessary to design a game. And we have a tendency to iterate. We don't really do a lot of upfront planning, but this, this networking stuff makes it much more difficult to modify existing game systems. So now we have to actually think about stuff, I guess.
Well, this is also my rising theory about why it is that most MMOs are actually kind of bad from a core gameplay standpoint, which is that, as we've discovered, it's pretty hard to just sort of it's very hard to just on paper design an experience that has the same feel that you're going for theoretically. And so most of the time, at least for us, we need to iterate towards it. And so if it's the case that as you're building up systems to support that first idea, which is inevitably the worst one, right? And they become more and more sort of concrete and more heavy over time, then it seems to me like maybe there's just generally some design weight associated with multiplayer systems being added into a game.
Sure.
Right?
Well, and MMOs in particular have the added technical problem where lag is pretty much guaranteed just because of the sheer number of people that are involved connecting to the server. So that's why in a game like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14 or whatever, there's always what is referred to as the global cooldown, which is you'll hit a button to use an ability, and then there'll be a 1.5 second delay before you can press another button to activate the next ability. And it makes everything move very slowly, in combat, and it makes it much more difficult to make an action-oriented game, which I know WildStar ran into a lot of trouble with Australian players.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Australian players basically considered the game unplayable because it had the general vibe of something like World of Warcraft, but the combat was extremely action heavy and had a lot of aiming elements and that kind of stuff. And with 400 to 600 millisecond ping, when you have like a 1 second charge up ability, and it's really important that you aim it to where the enemy actually is, and you don't know where they are because they're like you're seeing them.
They're teleporting,
or 6/10 of a second too far in the past. So that really sort of crowded out a lot of players from around the world.
They didn't set up a server in Australia.
I guess not. I think they did it much later, after everybody stopped.
Well,
playing.
yeah, that's another one of the problems, right? Is when you launch a game, you launch it for the world, and even if you try to restrict its location, players will get at it.
They'll do it anyways.
Anyway. And so when you launch a game, it becomes global immediately. And if you don't already have the infrastructure in place for the multiplayer case to handle the fact that people are 20,000 miles, I guess 10,000 miles apart, and to handle that extra latency, then people have a bad experience. And so you have to, it adds all these requirements just to the upfront design, becomes much harder. The infrastructure you need to run the game becomes much more immense. And
this kind of reminds me of when we talk a lot about how making the game is the easiest part of game development. And then there's like the business side and the marketing side and all this other stuff that is much, much harder. And I think with a multiplayer game, it's not really the game design itself that is the challenge. It's turning that idea into an enjoyable experience with all these technical hurdles. So that's kind of what that's the road that we're currently going
add
down.
on top of that. It's all hard enough anyway, but then you add on top of it all these fucking hackers.
Oh yeah.
And like I've got nothing against hacking as a thing to do, just like digging into software trying to figure out how it works. I mean that's fine, it's fun, it's a good educational experience. But the problem is people use it to ruin the design of a game and to ruin other players' experience, because games are balanced to have a certain kind of difficulty. They're designed, especially if they have in-game economies and stuff, they're designed to provide a certain kind of experience. And as soon as somebody comes in and breaks that thing, then it actually breaks the entire structure and concept of the game, or can, depending on the game design.
What I think is interesting about hacking is how it's almost it's made so much more easy by the fact that people are anonymous. So there are social repercussions to cheating in a game in person, right? So like if somebody says, "Hey, you want to play a game of chess?" and you're like, "Sure," and you just like whip out 3 queens out of your pocket and drop those on the board, and you're like, this is my setup now. I just added some queens to my setup.
Yeah, right.
People are like, no, and you're a dick now. Nobody wants to play chess with you. But if you're hacking online, nobody can really stop you, and nobody like nobody, there's no social feedback on that. So you can just keep
But it's
doing
worse than that because there is when people know that you're hacking. The problem is that it's actually especially the more complicated a game gets, the more difficult it is to be able to determine if a person is hacking or just really good. And and so that forces us as the designers to be sort of limited in how we're allowed to design the system, because that system has to be able to detect cheating. It just has to.
Right.
And so that means we have to simplify things so that cheating becomes easier to detect potentially, or it means we have to offload way more of the processing onto our own central servers so that everything has to go through us as a gatekeeper, which adds a huge amount of infrastructure and R&D costs to us to actually put the game out. And so anytime you hear, and we talked about this in the past with piracy and stuff, like the immediate effects of these things, like I would generally agree, it's this kind of weird thing where it seems like nothing bad happens when you do it, but the sort of cascading consequences that affect you just fundamental game design are enormous. I mean, just enormous. It's the same thing with web development in general. And any web developer will agree, and it's certainly what I've been experiencing. Designing a web experience is actually very easy and very fun, but that's not what you spend your time doing. You don't spend your time coding up the cool web app you made. You spend your time coming up with every possible way that a person could break it to try to hack into your database and steal all of your data and make sure that they can't do that.
It's kind of an annoying reality of being a human, isn't it? That you just have to.
Yeah, everyone's trying to break and steal your shit all the time.
Yep. You just need enough security to keep honest people honest.
So anyway, if you are a hacker who tries to ruin game experiences for other people, or no one,
fuck you, buddy.
Fuck you and fuck.
Or what's that those Lizard Squad guys, who I'm still not sure what their actual motive is, but anytime there's a major MMO launch, they DDoS the servers.
They just break it because they're just assholes.
But it's like, why? Because it isn't like people have already bought the game. It's not like they're stopping people from buying the game. They're really just stopping people from playing it. So they're just hurting a bunch of people who want to play games, which is the weirdest thing.
And the company that put 5 or whatever years into making this product to try to get people to enjoy it, and then
it's weird.
Then servers die. People take time off. For some reason, people still take time off of work for MMO launches.
The day of, which is a bad
day of.
You should do it like 5 days later. It's really
always give an MMO launch, especially if it's a good one. Give it 5 days for the DDoS attacks to stop. And
probably also if it's a really bad one because it probably doesn't have good architecture.
Yes. Yeah. So also, I have a confession to make.
What's that?
You guys? So this morning I walked into Sam's place and I had my water bottle with me. And the last time I was here, Sam was like, "Oh, take off your shoes," which I normally don't do
because he's been tracking leaves all up in my house.
Yeah. So I was like, I'll make it a point this time to remember to take my shoes off. So I come in the house, I bend down to take my shoes off, and I'm holding my water bottle tucked under my arm.
And you poured water everywhere?
My water bottle is just open, and I just poured it everywhere. So I yell up to Sam, and I'm like, "Hey, you have a towel? I poured water all over the floor." Well, it turns out that was only half true, Sam.
Oh, what?
Because I poured half of the water into your left shoe.
What the fuck? Wait, I heard you giggling while you were supposedly mopping this up.
It turns out there wasn't that much to mop up because your shoe just absorbed most of it.
I would call you a son of a bitch, but it doesn't apply to the situation. You twat.
So anyway, that happened.
Nice work.
And otherwise, we're going to Indie PopCon June 17th and 19th.
Oh, this is fun. So speaking of pouring water into people's shoes, so
speaking of fuck up,
Seth was like, "Hey, we should." We're going to need to check out that booking and maybe add a room to it because we'll be having our 4th employee along. So we need another hotel room. And so I was like, okay, let me look at my dates. So I go get the dates and I'm like, this is weird. This is just first of all, it's just for a day and a half, which I knew that Indie PopCon was 3 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's weird. So I go, I'm like, let me just check the dates. I probably just need to add a day to it or something.
It was booked on a Thursday or something.
Yeah, I had booked the wrong month. I had booked 2 days in July.
It was the wrong day. The wrong days. The wrong duration. The wrong month. It couldn't have been.
It couldn't have been more wrong.
And it was for a hotel that's not even listed as one of the hotels.
Yeah, I don't know how this. I don't even know how this fucking happened. I know we made If you guys recall, we did all of our conference planning in January. I think when we were planning out how to get to GC and doing a hotel, we did all that in like a 3-hour blast in the morning. And I don't know how I got all that stuff so crossed. So the whole point about us needing to hire a detail-oriented person, I think, Seth can't even screw his water bottle lid on, and I book hotels a month wrong. So yeah, we need some help over here. We're dying.
Things happen. I'd say we are detail oriented at about a 90% rate, but that 10% really matters, you know?
Yeah, well, I feel like that's the normal level, you know? It's like you're generally paying attention to the appropriate things to pay attention to, but if your lapses of judgment make people's shoes soggy, Seth, or
Yeah, well, it'll dry out probably. Yeah, and also as part of our R&D stuff, we've been doing a lot of reading about various like team stuff and productivity and psychology and blah. And there's this super cool book that recently came out by Charles Duhigg, who also wrote The Power of Habit, which we always tell everybody to read because that's also good. This book is called Smarter, Faster, Better, which is a terrible and very forgettable title. But it's basically just a book about sort of the types of behaviors and habits that you see coming out of really, really highly productive teams and highly productive people.
I already forgot the title, by the way. I know
Smarter, Faster, Better.
Okay.
it's because you can't. The word order could be swapped.
Yeah, it could be literally anything.
Yeah.
Well, and it's actually it's a play on this better, faster, stronger, or whatever.
Just in a different.
It's in a different order and with slightly different words.
Ugh.
But yeah, it's very hard to remember.
You don't want to
Charles Duhigg.
I think
is the author.
You don't want to fight like Daft Punk and Kanye on naming something.
BFS, SBF,
it's been done. You know, don't try to reverse the order, Charles.
It's been done to death, Charles.
Anyways.
And there's a really interesting... So the first section of the book talks about teams and what makes certain teams more effective than others. And a lot of this research comes out of Google. Because Google has 4 billion employees and they're constantly collecting data on all of them and trying to do everything they can to quantify what the people are doing. Yeah, everyone else too. But the big difference is, of course, while Google is collecting data on everyone in the world in general, they get to collect even more data on the people who work in their very own offices.
Yeah.
And so they tried to figure out, they have this, I can't remember what they call it, like Department of People Science or something. They have an entire department whose job is to just constantly spy on everybody and try to figure out how to make people better at their jobs. And
I guess it's like a benevolent version of the NSA, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure Google employees opt into this, as do we all when we scroll to the end of every license agreement.
Yeah,
if you call that opting in.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure clicking accept a license agreement truly is opting in.
Well, it's not opting out.
No, I think it's I think it's just a requirement.
I guess.
Under the guise of an opt-in.
The interesting thing that they found, so there's a lot of conventional wisdom out there about how to have a really effective team when it comes to, getting stuff done. And a lot of it focuses on things like, mixture of introverts and extroverts, or ensuring that you have, people of very diverse backgrounds, people with certain, IQs, certain blah, blah, blah. There's all this stuff basically focusing on who it is that's on the team. And what they found at Google was that actually this is not the most important thing. And in fact, whoever is on the team is almost entirely uncorrelated with the team's potential output.
So you're saying that something like your measures of extroversion or your mix of extroverts versus introverts is essentially irrelevant to the end outcome of whatever your team comp is.
Yeah, because the thing that actually does matter is simply how the team members treat each other. And there's this concept that comes up called psychological safety, which essentially is the idea that you feel that you can give input and speak up about something and actually be listened to and not be attacked for the things that you say or believe. And this could be, something simple like, if there's a person in the group who's particularly quiet and reserved, that, during a meeting, the team leader makes sure to, rope that person into the discussion and be like, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while. What do you think about this? That kind of stuff. And
it's antithesis its antithesis could be as simple as just constantly berating or interrupting people who are trying to say things too.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, so anything that you do, and I think they framed it in a very interesting way, which is a team is effective when team members are willing to give up control of the conversation or of their ideas or whatever to the team, and essentially sort of more identify with being on the team instead of being worried about their own individual contributions and that kind of stuff. And so you can foster that environment by basically just being nice to people and listening to them.
Yeah, that's kind of the message at the end of it, right? It's just make sure that you listen when people are talking and don't be a jerk.
Yeah, people are happier and they do better work when.
So do you think this is why the whole phenomenon of like you have those team building exercises, right? And they're spoken of a lot in a sort of very corporate, as a joke, right? In a corporate sense, where they're like, oh,
well, it is a joke.
It is a joke, but it's like, oh, our quarterly team building exercise, we're gonna go, paintball with everybody.
Yeah, that's not how team building works. Like every day should be a team building exercise, right? Like you shouldn't have to take a break from work to build your team's morale back up
after working it into the ground.
Yeah, like you should try to operate your team in the way that people really enjoy being a part of the team.
Yeah, actually, I think that's fair. If your company needs retreats and team building exercises and that kind of thing, that's because they're doing all of the rest of the stuff wrong.
Wait, well, right. I think they're still fun to do. If you're doing everything right, they would actually be a blast.
If it
needs them. Well, here's a question though. I was actually just realized because this concept of psychological safety, and we talk about this a lot with putting your stuff out on the internet being very difficult.
Yep. Which it is.
What do you think actually that has, as far as video games in particular are concerned? Because like you spend 2 years making a thing, and during that process, you might show some screenshots or get some interviews with press or whatever, and people start in those comment sections commenting on whatever it is that you're doing. What about just the general concept of psychological safety applied to something like the internet or like putting your stuff up and getting feedback?
Well, yeah, I think that's where the recognition that the internet is just riddled with assholes is essential here, right? Because
riddled with assholes is like, I just got the grossest image in my mind.
Normally
exactly how it should be.
Yeah. Normally that phrase is what, riddled with bullets.
That's what I'm saying.
Bullet holes.
A bunch of
riddled with assholes.
Riddled with assholes. The internet filled to the brim with assholes, which is another graphic.
It's like a bucket of the internet's a bucket of sphincters.
No matter how gross all of it sounds, it's still better than what the internet actually is.
But so what does that do though, right?
Well, I think this is an important point is within a team, it's the responsibility of all parties to maintain that psychological safety net, right? And any team member that isn't doing that's basically being an internet sphincter, is going to need to get kicked out of the team or retrained, probably just kicked out. I think people are kind of the way they are is what I've learned in my old age. And so you need to keep the team as a whole a very safe place to tackle problems within.
Which this does make the question when it comes to solo development.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have, and this is something that we've encountered a lot, where if you don't have a teammate around you, where somebody makes some snarky comment about something you poured your soul into, and somebody just glances at it and then takes a big dump on it. It's easy to just get furious and immediately start writing up a response and like, I'm going to put this internet person in their place. And then your teammate steps in and they're like, hold on. Who gives a fuck?
Well, I think,
to finish the part about the internet response, then I think the key there is that those people are not your teammates, they're not your peers. Their opinions are based on nonsense almost universally, and so you need to. The key there is to distance yourself entirely from that possibility because it's a toxic. It's a toxic interaction on average.
Well, I think this plays into this really interesting and oftentimes extremely difficult dynamic that devs are put into, where you have your player base, right? And your player base has people in it who I think you would consider on your team, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also has people who you would
Bunch of
definitely
assholes.
consider a bunch of assholes who you should ignore. And the problem is that the masquerading of a sort of a teammate on a community level is very easy to do, and also happens very, very frequently, such that you can have someone who seems like they might just be super enthusiastic about the game, but as a result of that enthusiasm, they might be sort of, fever pitched about some change you made and try to wreck your day, just by being.
Well, then further, as if they kind of get your ear by being involved in your community and having direct interactions with you, then there are certain people who, I think masquerading is exactly the right word, who begin to feel like now you somehow owe them. And that if they have an opinion about how you, the dev, should be doing things, that it's a real problem if you don't listen to them.
It's an interesting challenge that I think game developers probably face, in particular, more so than people in other creative industries. I can't say for sure, but because of the fact that games, they exist on the computer, they tend to have, if they have online components, and they definitely have online communities and that kind of stuff. So people are very vocal online, and they try to reach out to the devs a lot. Whereas I don't know if that's the case with writing a book or making a movie or something. I mean, I don't know if people specifically try to write messages to Marvel about what they did with the story in the latest Avengers movie.
I mean, no doubt they do, but I think I think actually that's not really so much the important distinction as it is the indie scene versus AAA, because without a doubt, novelists, because that's always a one-person gig, right? Or maybe two, but usually one. It's a one-person gig, and without a doubt, they get lots and lots of
fan mail,
of fan mail and hate mail and every sort of mail.
Yeah.
And as solo devs or small team devs like ours, then because the thing is, our persona and the people behind the scenes are an obvious human component of the machine that built the product that somebody likes or hates or wants to have changed or whatever, and it makes it very obvious who they can reach out to. But something like Marvel is a giant faceless organization.
You just write a letter to them and it goes into the mailroom.
Or with movies or something, right? And so for those kinds of things, there are communities that form around those concepts. So there's Marvel fan forums and subreddits and whatever, and of course for any particular hero franchise in that group. But those aren't really, Marvel itself isn't part of that community.
Right. The community grows up around it.
Yeah, or beside it, right? So it's not actually.
Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of what I was getting at with like sort of the distinction where game developers are sort of I don't want to say expected to sort of engage with the community on that level, but players really look for that.
I mean, I would say you're much more exposed as a game dev, and I think there has been a lot of talk about this, especially with female devs or anybody who's not a heterosexual dev or anything like basically any non-white male.
Well, yeah, anybody who's not a white guy, straight white guy.
They get we've talked about this in previous things, but they get this sort of harassment or any sort of verbal poison on a daily basis. And I guess my point with this whole thing and bringing it back to this core idea that you were saying, Seth, is that if it's the case that in order to really function at a really high level and produce these really good works, that the psychological safety is essentially a necessary component of that, period.
Then do you have to separate yourself from the consumers?
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, do you have to, or I guess, where's the responsibility to either from a platform or just from a business perspective to make sure that you insulate your people?
Well, you need to build mechanisms for that. I mean, and we've actually, and as three straight white dudes, like, we don't suffer that kind of abuse that lots of other people do. But even still, there's a lot of psychological unsafety.
Danger
in the much less, but it's not danger because it's in the much less serious sense for us,
right?
In terms of just people hating on the things that we make, right? But that still, even that damages psychological safety, even though it doesn't imply like physical safety problems. And we've actually, and we've talked about these in the podcast quite a bit before too. We've had to, over the past year or so, build all kinds of mechanisms to basically add a layer of automation and robot responses and stuff in between our player base and ourselves. And to have tools that once somebody gets through that process, that if they become a problem for us, that we can easily remove them. And every game design and every community design that we have focuses a big part of the focus is how do we keep the assholes out?
Yeah,
Because
because we fucking love hearing from people who are excited about. And actually, we got an amazing Facebook comment on the Crashlands page today where somebody was just raving and raving about the game and how it was, as he put it, the best game he's ever played in the palm of his hand since he picked up Pokemon Red and Blue when it first came out. I was just like, oh. That's like, yeah, just it's so nice to hear that people are enjoying it that much. But yeah, we don't need the.
But even that
stuff.
aside, like I don't even need to hear lots of good things about the stuff we're doing. It's also just nice to talk to regular people. Just
well, yeah, we don't need it, but
Yeah.
it's nice.
it's more about the getting rid of the negativity than it is about anything else. Because the fact is, it's fun to have a platform because of our games, to have a reach and a platform to stand on where we can interact with lots of interesting people and talk about cool stuff, and to the extent we can, try to make the world a more interesting and happier place. And but to do that, we do have to protect our own psychological safety, and we also have to do that for our future employees, and that will become more difficult as it departs from being 3 straight white dudes, because now all of a sudden it changes just from people hating on the things we make to people hating on the people who make them, because unfortunately that's the world we live in. So without a doubt, it's our responsibility as a studio to build mechanisms to insulate our people from that kind of toxic shit and find out how to handle it when it gets through, so that we can try to prevent future instances of the same things. And so
Which,
on.
by the way, is something we're doing a lot of reading on as well. So
Prepare yourself.
yeah.
All right, I want to dive into the questions.
Let's do it.
We're good halfway through. And the first one I want to start with is not actually the first question, but I think...
Wait, where do these questions come from?
These questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. You can ask them. You can use your Bscotch ID. You can earn an avatar for the forums and for your game playing by
It's a coffee
getting
cup.
your question answered. It's a big coffee cup.
Ooh, should we
or
update
you could just
that
ask
to
anonymous.
use podcast art?
Oh my god.
We probably should update it, because
Or we could add another one if you get a few questions answered.
If you get
Boom.
33
Nah.
questions answered, you get the sweet.
All right, so this first question comes from FB Gaming, and I think this also partially relates to what we're talking about now, which is why I want to bring it up. He says, in the last episode, you talked a lot about not giving a fuck, which we did. If you haven't watched that episode or listened to the episode, go do it now. Do you think there should be a limit to how much you should not give a fuck?
I think.
Oh yeah, I have this. Okay, sorry.
I had. I think the song by John LaJoie, which we also mentioned last time, actually illustrates his point perfectly, because at the very end he gives so few fucks that he doesn't even give a fuck about not giving a fuck, which causes him to give a fuck about everything.
It's like a
And
zen.
it comes full
yeah,
circle, and presumably that can only end a disaster. So from that perspective, yes.
It kind of reminds me of that that there's a comic by Hyperbole and a Half where she talks about breaking through depression, where she's been depressed for so long, and then was it like she drops a bag of Skittles or something?
No, there's a piece of corn that she saw under the fridge.
Yeah. and it somehow, like, she was so depressed that she somehow stopped caring about being depressed or something. Like it sort of ate itself, you know?
Yeah.
Like the proverbial like snake eating its own tail situation. And I think the end of, like Adam saying, the end of that John LaJoie song is a perfect example of that, where after not giving a fuck about everything for long enough, you somehow feel free to give your fucks.
Well, so I think we need to talk about the concept of fuck parity or fuck balance, if you will.
Fuck parody and fuck balance. Okay.
So
With you so far.
And this is in the amazing book that I recommended last week, which is The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a Fuck.
Who's this by?
I can't remember, but it's pretty good.
I'm pretty sure with that name you could Google it, you'd be fine.
Yeah. So the basic idea here is that there's essentially 2 aspects to giving a fuck. One is giving a fuck about something.
Okay.
And that is something that's inherent to you. So if somebody's like, hey, you want to come to my baby shower? And inside you're thinking, I don't give a fuck about baby showers. Or if somebody asks you, you know, if you want to go see a particular movie or something, and you're like, nah, I don't give a fuck about that movie. And that's just the idea. Like, there are things that you care about and there's things that you don't care about, right? And then there's the idea of giving a fuck to something. And that is when you physically take action and devote time and energy into that thing.
So one is like the thought and one is the action.
One is the thought and one is the action. So it's not that we, you know, encourage you to just not give a fuck about anything. It's that you should only give fucks to the things that you give a fuck about. And you should not give any more fucks to anything else other than those. Otherwise, you're just gonna be wasting your time, and you're gonna be really sad about everything. That's fuck parody.
Fuck parody.
So that's my answer.
It's pretty good. I like it.
Yeah, I like this evolving theory of giving a fuck or not giving a fuck. I think we'll pull this through, see if we can develop a really robust theory about the end of it.
It's all about being true to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Only give fucks to the things you give a fuck about.
That's a quotable moment right there.
Yeah.
All right, next question comes from I don't know, I'm bored 33 or IDK I'm bored, who says, I'll start by saying I love Tau Fight 2, which is something we hear very rarely.
Well, nobody plays it.
Nobody plays. So if you haven't played it, it is free. And by free, I mean like it's so free that we make no money off it.
Free as in beer? Is that how that works?
So
yeah, there's a way that you could pay us using it, but you're probably not going to.
Yeah, it's not necessary at all. So check it out if you haven't played it. But I don't know. I'm bored asks, I'm really curious, what was the inspiration for the magical animal shooting monocle? And I think this actually rolls right back into the psychological safety and also the not give a fuck thing that we've been talking about quite a bit.
Hit it.
Which is that, at the beginning of our development, I was so bad at the art, and Seth was good at programming, but still was figuring out like how to do everything. So we needed to figure out just a really easy mechanism by which we could pack a lot of content into the game, but not with a lot of extra art overhead. And so
or just work in general.
Yeah, just the laziest method possible. And so making these just circles, variously colored circles, which, let's face it, that's all they actually are. They're technically animal themed, but they're pretty much all just a bunch of circles.
Animal themed circles.
So you're shooting circles out of your face, but the reality was that you didn't actually start off shooting them out of your face. And also if you look at where the shot comes out, so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it comes out lower than your face. It comes out of your chest, right?
No, it comes out of your face.
Okay, we moved it up.
We moved it up.
So it was the case that again, my general art powers and stuff were just not particularly good. So Seth and I were chatting about this problem again, going to the psychological safety thing. I was like, hey, I cannot draw an animation for this. It's going to look good of some guy like throwing these or really doing anything to these things. They just need
yeah, well, we couldn't do the throwing, so then we tried something. Our next idea was Hardik would just have a wormhole on his chest, just like always, like in his chest cavity, and the animals would come out of there. But
yeah, and then
that didn't work either.
That didn't work either because I couldn't draw a wormhole, which is hilarious because it's a hole.
It's a hole.
It's drawing nothingness. And so the character literally just happened to have a monocle on. Also because I didn't want to have to draw his other eye when I was making him as a character. The fact that the monocle has now looped into the general Crashlands and Butterscotch universe lore in a really powerful way was not planned in any sense whatsoever. And so I guess the short answer is there was no inspiration for the magical animal shooting monocle. It was all born out of necessity.
But there was inspiration. It was born out of necessity, but then it was the realization that we could do something amusing with that limitation.
I guess the way to think about it, we talked about this last time about how we usually put explosions over things that I can't quite animate yet, right?
So similarly, we put a monocle over this guy's face.
Well, it's kind of like it's a distraction technique, right? We made instead of just shooting bullets out, at which point you would have had more time mentally to think about, okay, if he's shooting bullets, it should look like blah. But if we could just sort of distract you with the spectacle of firing animals out of your face.
You have no frame of reference for what that's supposed to be.
It's the same thing as the explosion model, just applied back onto here, and it worked fabulously. Everybody should go play Tau Fight 2.
Game dev sleight of hand.
Yeah, it's the best. So next question comes from Mitron, who asks, what gear do you guys use? Are there any particular gizmos you have at home or take on the road? Any satisfying cup warmers, acceptable phone battery cases, excellent USB humping dogs, legendary rechargeable heated knitting wool hand gloves, and the like?
I try to reduce my gizmo requirements all the way down to 0.
Why is that? Why?
I don't like depending on things. And part of it is I'm constantly having to like go to St. Louis to work for a while. From working from home, it gets just so fucking depressing sitting in one spot, like, and just never going anywhere else. And so I like to move around my house at least a little bit to get,
So
like
you
sit on the
actually
couch and
wanna-
work for a while. So I
You
just,
actually want to build out some inconvenience in your life so that you have more life to live.
yeah, exactly. So that I can live longer, as we've discussed previously. And so for me, that means just I strip it down to the bare essentials, which is basically my laptop, earbuds, and then whatever microphone is most appropriate for the setting that I'm in. So when I'm traveling and stuff, I'll just stick with the Meteor mic or the inbuilt shitty. What is the deal with shitty laptop mics? How is it so? How is it that
I think because a
mic is
laptop
just
mic
garbage?
is just a tiny pinprick sized hole in your computer
Is
that
there,
somehow
is there
sound
no
falls
alternative
into.
to that? But anyway, that aside, yeah. So it's whatever minimal stuff I can have. Like I've got a tiny thin moleskin that sits in my back pocket, one pen to write on it if I ever need to, and then my phone.
We're
And that's just
shockingly
it.
non-technical, actually.
Yeah, I always have a Stettler permanent Lumocolor size 5 pen in my pocket and a Moleskine.
That is really specific.
It's a really good pen. I ordered 40 of them.
I oftentimes think I have a pen in my pocket, but then I lost it somewhere.
I used to use the technique of always carrying a black pen and a neon pink pen. And anytime somebody asked to borrow a pen, I would give them the pink one because they somehow always remembered to give it back.
Oh, because it's useless.
They're like, I can't use this.
But also,
anywhere.
I feel like
You should also make it a little sticky.
just rub some chapstick on it before you
Yeah.
put it in your pocket, so it's like a little wet.
Well, there's the problem of once you become known as the guy who has a pen, then nobody around you remembers to bring pens because they know they can depend
But
on
if
you
they
to
if
have
they
them.
if they remember you as the guy who always brings the sticky pen,
Stop.
Is that better?
Exactly.
Is it?
What's on that? It's just sticky. You
It's
just put a
just
bunch of
sticky.
stickers on it and then ripped them off again to get the
yeah, it would be really
effect.
easy. I mean, it's kind of like because I always carry chapstick in my pocket, but every once in a while I just idly will peel the wrapper thing off of it, and then I end up with just a sticky chapstick thing that sits in my pocket.
On purpose or just
It just
way
tends to be what happens over time.
I
so
think-
there's this idea that I'm wondering if you guys have thought about this. Speaking of gadgets and gizmos, that human beings have this tendency to really over anticipate the impact of change
Yeah.
in their lives.
It's called emotional forecasting.
Emotion, yeah, and people. Well, I shouldn't say people are really bad at it. I'll just say people tend to do it in a really specific way, which is they just really exaggerate stuff. So you'd be like, "Oh man, I've been in terrible shape my whole life, but once I buy this Wii Fit board, it's just that's gonna be the thing. Like I'm gonna just do it. So you'll get it, you'll do it once. You're like, wow, that was not as awesome as I thought, and then you just put it away and then never see it again. And I feel like being younger, you're a lot more susceptible to this kind of thinking because you just haven't experienced that much. But nowadays, I just don't really give a crap about getting new stuff because it's almost always just never that big of a deal.
Yeah, almost invariably it doesn't change a thing. That's what I've
and
noticed.
then
too.
you stop using it after a short period of time. I mean, I just have tons of stuff in my house which I tend to try to get rid of over time. But I've just accumulated all these just random little things, and I no longer buy random little things because I've got enough of them that I don't use, and I know that I'm not going to use them.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact is, like, my daily life consists of wearing one of about 5 shirts, one of about 3 pairs of pants, one of 2 pairs of shoes, using my laptop, using one pen,
You know why?
and
Because
one
you
coffee
have-
mug. Right?
Because
That's my life.
you've achieved fuck parity.
That's right. Yeah.
You're only buying stuff that you actually give a fuck about.
Well, this is-
and
Well, the
This
nice
is
thing
fun.
about doing that too is that you then end up you save so much money by not buying the just garbage. That now
Yeah.
when you go want to buy a thing you give a fuck about, you can actually invest in it.
I
And,
think
buy
there's
a good
get a
thing.
nice one.
There's probably even another hidden one here, which is actually that of the ability to sort of easily react to a shifting priority. So, for example, about 2 weeks ago, I looked at my 5 shirts and I was like, I've been wearing these 5 shirts. I have some of these shirts that I've had since my freshman year of college, and God damn it, I'm
a
grown-up.
man.
I'm a grown ass man.
I'm a grown ass man.
I need to actually put about 10 minutes of thought into my looks as far as fashion's concerned. So I did, and then I went to Marshall's
And
which
bought
is the
5
best.
different shirts and
I
got
bought-
rid of the
I've-
other ones.
Yep, but the thing is, that amounted to a complete wardrobe change.
Right.
And
right.
my
You don't
fiance
have
this
as much
morning,
momentum anymore.
yeah, my fiance this morning was like, "Wow, you've been looking really sharp the last couple of days." And the thing is, I've changed nothing. I put on one of my 5 shirts. Like functionally, I've changed nothing.
You just changed
This
your
is-
selection set.
Yeah, and the total cost though for me to do that was super duper low, both because I went to Marshalls and because I only own 5 shirts.
This is the don't repeat. This is the dry principle from programming.
Yeah, you should use it in real life.
Yeah. It's the dry principle of programming is don't repeat yourself, which basically means don't have redundant information lying around so that if you ever want to make a change, you have to change lots of stuff at the same time, right? And
Yeah.
I did the same thing with my jeans. I had a bunch of shitty old jeans a year ago, and I was like, you know what? It's time. And I took all 4 pairs of jeans that I owned,
All 4.
which happened to be basically all of my pants items. I just went and got 4 new pairs, and boom, my whole look changes.
Yeah.
Jeans wise, anyways.
Speaking of which, I think I might have mentioned this in a previous podcast episode, but seriously, guys, these stretchy American Eagle jeans, fucking amazing.
I don't think you did, but you did mention it a lot over the past week.
Yeah, Adam
Yeah.
we would go outside and Adam would just start like doing
You just start
split squats.
stretching.
They're
Look at this.
amazing.
And then he'd be like, "Look at these pants."
The past trends that jeans have gone through have always been really aggravating to me as a guy who didn't give a shit about like the clothes I was wearing, because for a long period of time it seemed like the more structurally impaired your pants were, the more prevalent they were and easy to find, because they were all had holes in them and were like, you know, sanded or something.
This
Yeah,
is,
you're buying pre-frayed,
Yeah, you were buying
pre-faded,
structurally
pre-ripped
unsound.
jeans.
This is a
What the fuck?
deconstructed jean.
Yeah.
It's $300.
Though, all of a
It's
sudden-
actually 4 threads of denim.
Right. All of a sudden, though, that we've like gone the other direction, and now it's like going. It's like purely the most functional kind of gene in the universe, where
And that are very sharp looking.
and they're sharp looking, and then you can actually like run around. Like you could flee from zombies. You could do whatever you need to.
Wait, speaking of both products we love and fleeing from zombies, I think there's an interesting point here, though, about just like what stuff you're carrying or what sort of gadgets you use, because the reality also is that so much stuff has been sort of sucked into our devices over time that you just don't need to carry much of anything anymore. Like I have a watch because I don't like to check my time on my phone.
Also,
But let's be
it's
real,
stylish.
You
It's
probably
stylish.
also don't even need to carry your device, really.
Well, yeah, you don't. I'm sure you don't need to. But so I want to talk, though. Speaking of Adam's point about zombies, about this app I found the other day that Adam also pointed out, which is called Zombies, Run with an exclamation point. And it's fucking awesome because I hate running, but I do it anyways. And so I thought maybe I can make this more enjoyable for myself and also get myself to go, further and faster. And Adam mentioned this app, and basically it's a run tracker like pretty much all the other run trackers out there. You can turn on your GPS, it'll show you on the map where you are, time yourself, whatever. But the best part about it is that as you run, it's actually telling you a sort of like a Walking Dead-esque, it's a zombie story, but it's fully voice acted and everything, and you're essentially participating in it as a runner for this post-apocalyptic town. And because of how they do it, so as you're running, you also collect supplies and stuff. So in other words, it motivates you to continue running by that. And then also every so often it drips in a new piece of the voice work content that's about the story, right? Because they'll be like, oh, we need you to go check out this hospital. And the guy will be chatting with you for a little bit and sort of making some snarky remarks. And then you'll be running. And then about 2 minutes later, he'll be like, Runner 5, there's a huge horde of zombies to the east. They appear to have picked up on the sounds you've been making running through the hospital. You're going to need to take a left this way, and you don't have to actually change direction or anything. But it's awesome because you feel like it suddenly makes the running have an actual meaning, whereas before it just feels like standard grinding procedure for any MMO.
Yes. I was going to say, this reminds me exactly of the conversation we had about whether or not having randomness in a game is lazy design or if it's actually important for the game. Remember that?
Yeah.
I think it was like 3 episodes ago or something. Because really you're not doing anything different, right? You're not taking any different actions than you used to. You're going outside, you're running, and then you're coming back home. Yeah. But now while you're doing it, there's randomness, right? There's surprises that happen as you go.
But it won't continue happening unless I continue running.
Exactly, yeah. So you are causing the random things to happen, but you still don't know what's going to happen. And also you've been given a sense of purpose, which Yeah, that's interesting.
It's the bomb is what it is. And I got chased by zombies for 2 days, and I ran so hard after not running for a long time that my body's just been kind of wrecked for the last day and a half. So I'll be starting again tomorrow. But I'm like super excited to go for a run tomorrow, which
I
literally
actually
has
need to
never been a thing I
start.
said.
Yeah, I need to start using it and trying it out. But this also, we were talking about this because it was just this kind of fun, cool idea, and it made us think of integrating this kind of thing into our own Butterscotch universe, which obviously we don't know what we're going to do, so this isn't a promise.
This is just theoretical.
This is
It's an
just
idea.
us. This is just us thinking about it. But the idea would be that because we can also, it sucks to have to exercise. It's just not fun. But we want to encourage it if we can. We want to try to encourage it to do it ourselves. And as we were thinking about it, we're like, actually, shit, there's all these really easy tie-ins you could do with real life doing stuff and game either rewards or content or whatever, depending on how closely those things are related. But even in the simplest sense, because we have Butterscotch ID, there's this app that most people use for run tracking called Runkeeper. And it has an open API, which means if people were into that kind of thing, we could basically let them log in and give us permission to access their API data from Runkeeper. And then we could give them rewards in our games for going out and doing runs.
Or even just have it be its own standalone thing.
Or its own standalone thing. Or
Where you play as a messenger from one of the other races that we've been kicking around in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Or because the easy thing to do would be to take existing games and then do something like say, hey, every mile you run, we're going to drop doubloons for you, like as if you're picking them up while you're running, right? Just trivially easy kind of implementation, all the way up to making a game where a core part of interacting with the game is by you going out in the world and doing stuff and then having that cause changes in the game.
Yeah.
Which would be very cool. So
That would
anyway.
be fun.
Who knows? But it's
We're just trying to give people, more points to do more cool stuff.
Yeah,
with our stuff.
life needs more points
It really does.
because life doesn't have a point.
Speaking of which, Alan Falcon asks, what are each of your top favorite Weird Al songs?
Albuquerque.
Yeah.
What about the Trapped in the Drive-Thru?
Oh yeah, that one's good.
The 12-minute song or whatever it is.
Any Weird Al song that's over 10 minutes long is a winner.
Yeah, shit. Albuquerque is like a good 6 minutes long or something, isn't it?
Yeah. Amish Paradise, phenomenal. White and Nerdy, also phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite recent one is The Word Crimes.
Yeah, that one's good.
Wow.
Although
Oh,
I really liked it the first time I listened to it, and then I actually just got really annoyed with it because of the focus on the arbitrary rules of grammar and stuff, like the ones that don't really matter, because language is people get confused about this thing, I think, too often, because you got these like language purists that just believe that language is the way it is, and if you do it wrong, then like that's a problem, right? But language is a tool for us to use, not vice versa. And if you do it too wrongly, then of course, if you're breaking the rules because you don't know the rules, then it makes it hard for the people to communicate and understand what you're doing. But if you follow the rules and then break them appropriately, or use conventions that are becoming established, just like changes in the language, then you're either doing something interesting or at least following things that are more understandable to people. So this whole like harping on things like the definition of irony, for example.
right.
It's like, yeah, it has an old strict definition, but literally no human uses it that way because nobody knows that definition. And as a consequence,
you gotta roll with the changes.
You gotta roll with the changes. And so as a consequence, when somebody says something is ironic, almost universally they mean it in a different way than its strict older definition, which is why dictionaries update themselves and now include the way that people normally use it today as one of the definitions. And so instead of correcting somebody on their use of irony, because what the fuck is the point of that, right? Just accept that it has multiple meanings because language changes over time.
You know what drives me crazy is when somebody gets upset at somebody else for saying the word literally but meaning figuratively.
Right.
Because
I literally ate the sun.
if somebody's like, I saw this movie, I literally died.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Because they mean it as a way to express an extremeness.
It's a
It's
hyperbolic.
as if
hyperbole,
they
exactly.
Yeah, it's as if they said I died from laughing, and died is in bold now because they put literally in front of it. Like, they didn't die. They know they didn't die. And
Everybody knows.
no motherfucker in the world says the word figuratively.
No, they don't.
Nobody says
Figuratively
that.
done. Well, that's because it takes the punch out.
Yeah, exactly.
If you-
It does exactly the opposite. It takes
If you
away.
point out that you're using the word in the opposite sense, then yeah, it's boring again.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is all to
So the
say,
only time-
chill the fuck out, people.
Yeah, the only time you should be upset if somebody says, I literally blank, is if you're a total idiot and you can't understand context. Then you should be upset about it. But
Or if they just say it so often that it's just
Yeah.
annoying.
That's the one. If it becomes something akin to saying the word like in excess, which is one of the easiest things to accidentally do, especially if you hang out with a bunch of young whippersnappers.
young bucks.
I mean, whenever I go hang out with college students for a bit, or even like my fiance's friends, then I'll start picking up the word like again, and I can't get it out.
Yeah.
of my damn vocabulary. But
Yeah, I've noticed I've been dropping L bombs way more often than I used to for some reason.
Yeah, we need to
I
tone
gotta
that
stop
shit
it.
down.
Quit dropping your L bombs. Maybe we should put that in the beginning of the podcast as a warning.
I'm gonna drop the people's L bomb.
The people's elbow.
Dombrowski asks, are there any prototypes that you put down for some reason or another that you plan on picking up back in the future?
Mountains of prototypes.
I think the only one is really extreme sloth cycling. We made a lot of games that are. Oh, we talked about Shepherd the other day.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
a lot-
well-
I don't know. It's a time problem. It's the same as everything else, right? We don't
Yeah,
have-
well, not only that, but I think prototypes are experiments, but I don't know if it's ever really that worth it to prototype something, put it on the back burner, and then go, okay, we're gonna make this into a full game, and then you pick up that same prototype again and try to work through the code base and
Yeah, you should start from scratch and thematically do something similar, but not
Yeah.
use the
Here's
same
an
code
interesting
base.
point, though. The reality is that we have never, ever,
We've never
of
picked
any
up a
game that we
prototype.
put on the back burner, it has never come off the back burner.
Yeah.
That's an important note.
This is something I used to tell people is that the back burner is in fact an incinerator.
Right.
It's just a garbage can. Let's be real.
All right, next question comes from Mitrone, who says, let's talk music. How do you pick music for your games? Fat Bard appears to be your official BS-ician since Crashlands. Have you worked with other artists in the past? And has your selection process evolved from game to game?
So we used to have a music composer who I went to law school with, but he moved on with his life and became a lawyer and had no time for music. But he was the one who composed the music for Tower Fight 2 and for Quadrupus Rampage. And then the next big thing was Crashlands. And
Well, the
Fat
other
Bard
games
was
use just freely available music, right?
free stuff from Free Music Archive, which is it's a good way to slam some stuff in there if you've got a project that you're not trying to invest a lot in
It's
financially.
Great. It's great for early projects, honestly.
Yeah, just trying to
Well,
get stuff out the door.
And
So,
also, this is an important point to say that if you need music for a thing, you either need to find free music or pay someone money.
don't try to
get
get somebody
music.
to make music for free for your
Or just steal it, because that'll end poorly.
Yeah, that will end poorly.
Yeah. And the big advantage of having a composer who knows what they're doing is you end up with these cool thematic elements that play out throughout all the different songs in the game. Whereas if you take free music, you're basically creating sort of a Frankenstein's monster of
I guess
of things.
I think the better way to put it, it's more like a mixtape. I don't think it's so terrible that it's like a monster, but it's more
No,
like a
yeah.
mixtape that gets at the mood of what your game is supposed to be, right? But not with a
But
it's
nobody,
not an album.
But if you
It's-
think about, say, the general theme song of Super Mario World or something, and everybody knows it, but it's not because they heard it just on the main menu. It's because the theme is pervasive, throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
And so when you hear something that has that melody in it, then you just like, oh, Mario, you just know because you've been listening to it for hours and hours and hours. So
All right, we got 2 questions left before wrapping up today.
okay,
And the first one is super weird. It comes from Kaki-chan 2.
Kaki-chan.
who asks, if you had the superpower of shooting objects out of your wrists, similar to Spider-Man's web in the movies, would you choose to be able to shoot 1, uncooked wieners, 2, whipped cream, or 3, pocket sand? And then he adds a thing, which is, if you like any other objects, please share. But I think we should stick to those 3. Which
okay,
uncooked
first-
wieners?
First, what the fuck is pocket sand?
That's just-
sand in your pocket. That's my
Pocket sand is what you keep on hand in case you ever need to blind somebody. I think it's like
right.
old-fashioned mace.
Let me see.
Okay, pocket sand is like old-fashioned mace. Got it.
You can just whip it out into somebody's eye.
Yeah,
When you do it, you have
that's
to
actually
yell.
true. I thought you were kidding, Seth, but I just looked this up. It's true.
Yeah, you have to yell pocket sand when you do it, though. Pocket sand.
Oh, it's from King of the Hill. That's where it comes from.
Hey.
Okay, I think the bigger question here is who is the villain in this scenario? Because that's really going to change.
What if you're the villain? What could you possibly do with these 3 powers?
Well, there doesn't need to be a villain here. This is about having a superpower, not being a superhero.
Yeah, but I want to know who I'm fighting because, for
What
example,
I'm saying is you don't need to be fighting.
Yeah, you're assuming that this means you have to go fight stuff, but you could just be, maybe you're just like the best hot dog.
Yeah,
maker
you
on
could
the
have a
planet.
hot dog stand with infinite free hot dogs, for example.
Don't let the health code people come and check out.
Okay, well,
where
let
you're
me-
getting your hot dogs.
okay, let me ask this though, because every superpower has to have some kind of a limitation on it, right? I
Well,
mean,
presumably to shoot hot dogs out of your wrists, you also you can't just create matter from nothing. So
Your body has to form them.
you got to be
So-
making them somehow, which means you either need to be also consuming hot dogs for like a 1-to-1 relationship, or because hot dogs are basically like compressed grossness, like from just harvested from an animal, you're gonna need like some new organ that's constantly converting the rest of your body
into hot dogs.
Yeah, you got some wrist organs that do hot dog conversion, and they have a sphincter on them.
Yeah.
that comes in.
Yeah, that's the other question is
Well, yeah, because an important
what
thing
does
here,
the orifice look like that these things are coming out of? Because
but importantly, those hot dogs are made from people.
yeah,
So
well, not people from
you as a person, meaning if you or anybody else eats those hot dogs, they are now a cannibal.
yeah. So assuming that you are
Hmm.
obeying the laws of thermodynamics, right?
Yes.
Is that right? That energy cannot be created or
Matter-
destroyed.
Correct.
Yeah, so you cannot simply summon uncooked wieners from nothing.
No.
Yeah.
They gotta
So you
come
would
from
also
somewhere.
you just need to be constantly eating other stuff, which would kind of put you at a net neutral sort
No,
of.
definitely net disadvantage because there's no perfect efficiency in converting
That's
things
true.
from one form to another.
Some energy be
right.
lost somewhere along the way.
It's like when you sell your game through a platform and they take 30%.
Yeah. And I think this would apply to all 3 of them, right? Like you can't just produce pocket sand or whipped cream
No,
from
but-
nothing
Well,
either.
so I think
Here, I want to say though, from coming back to the cannibal perspective, it seems to be generally accepted that babies are not cannibals, even though they drink human milk, right? It is the
think
case
you're right,
though that if you eat a person's arm, you're a cannibal because you're eating person meat.
so
I
is this the
think
difference between uncooked wieners and whipped cream?
exactly. I think you have to go whipped cream because it's the only way that either you or other people can eat the thing that you're squirting out of your wrists.
Yeah, but
Not
nobody's
be
going to do that. You're not going to be like on a
cannibal.
date and they'll get a hot chocolate or something and you'll be like, oh, let me, real quick, let me just squirt from your wrist.
I
no,
don't know.
man,
cream.
I think I
I'm
would use the
interested.
shit out of that. Yeah. I would totally date someone who could spray whipped cream on stuff for me.
It seems like a pretty
Out
good
of
selling
their
point.
wrist.
I
What
mean,
if they
yeah.
don't? What if they don't keep their whipped cream wrist sphincter clean?
I'm assuming a certain level of civil hygiene.
Yeah,
is
before
present.
they come to sit down to eat, I assume they wash their hands and their wrist sphincters.
Okay.
That's important.
This is very important. Wash your wrist sphincters before you eat, kids.
Pocket sand is definitely the most sort of combat oriented.
That would hurt.
Yeah, exactly. It would be abrasive to shoot out of a wrist sphincter.
Well, I guess that's another question. Though. What animals fire out a granular substance?
Nothing does
Because
that. Like
I have an
you got
idea.
bombardier beetles that shoot out
They shoot out
boiling
chemicals.
lava, basically.
You got quills from porcupines.
Here's a
but
question.
those
What if
those
you had
aren't shot
something-
out? They're just let go. They like whip them.
Yeah, but you could do something like each wrist shoots out a different chemical compound that when they combine in the air, they
Become
whipped
pocket
cream.
sand? That doesn't make any sense.
well,
That would
pocket
totally work.
pocket sand just needs to be some kind of solid granular substance.
Yeah, you could just have like basically a 2-part crystal formulant of some sort. So you shoot one part out of your right hand in a fine mist, and then one part of your left hand in a fine mist. And when they mix in the air, then they create sand.
Yeah, or maybe it's pocket salt, and you can shoot raw sodium out of one hand and raw chlorine out of the other.
Although if it was
That
elemental,
would be pretty
now,
murdery.
yeah, well, now one of those things would be a poison gas, and the other one would just explode when it contacted any form of water.
That's a hell of a skill to
Yeah,
have.
so
I think I'd prefer the whipped cream though. It's just
it seems less dangerous, and then you have the advantage of not being considered a cannibal. So.
Well, here's the other thing. Like, what if you had a dream? Because people lose control of various functions while they're
right. You either wake up with hot dogs in your bed.
Yeah, yeah. Like, how are you gonna wash your sheets with this superpower situation?
Although hot dogs are easy to wash off your sheets because you just pick them up.
That's true. Yeah, it's really either hot dogs or whipped cream.
Well, you just pick them up and then just cook them up for breakfast.
I fucking hate sand.
That's true.
Sand always gets everywhere.
That's right.
You got to get those back into your body somehow because you lost like 3 hot dogs overnight worth of body weight.
Okay, the final question is actually 2 questions.
Ooh, wait, no, I want to. There's one more point that I think is important. is if you're going for. Okay, so secreting.
Wait, can you throw up out of your wrist sphincters?
Probably. So, but secreting hot dogs means you're literally converting sort of like the entirety of your body into hot dogs, right?
Sure.
But if you're secreting milk, it actually means that you're shooting fat out of your wrists, which means you're removing fat from your body. So it can also be used as a weight management tool.
So you can just sit there and like shoot fat out.
Yeah, you can eat as much candy as you want because all that candy just turns into your wrist juices.
Or you would have to eat a ton of candy.
But
in
for
order to keep the
easy
fat levels
access,
up.
wouldn't your wrists need to keep a big fat reserve in them?
Yeah.
So you kind of have like wrist cankles.
There's all kinds of organs you could come. Like you could come up with a new distributed network, kind of like your lymphatic system that just transports whipped cream around.
But then you're gonna go get whipped cream cancer,
So then it would be like
which is the worst kind.
If that were the case, then if you like, let's say you got a cut somewhere or something, if you accidentally, got one of your cream.
Oh, they cut the cream pipe.
cream pipe,
Could you cream to death? I don't know.
you would bleed, and then also whipped cream would shoot out of your body. Because
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's pressurized, like it is in the can.
Yeah, it would have to be somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just flex it super hard. It'd be like
But
peristalsis.
then there's also, it would be body temperature whipped cream.
that is true. That would be.
Unless it comes with some sort of an endothermic chemical reaction.
Yeah, let's put that in there too.
Yeah, while we're at
This is what was that joke? Have you read on the Saturday morning breakfast cereal comics where the biomechanical engineer or something was like making things that should never exist?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's this in a nutshell.
Although I kind of think it should exist.
Bioengineers, get on this.
Yeah.
Whipped cream wrist sphincters.
Final question combo comes from both One Dead Saint and Alan Falcon. In this order, Alan Falcon asks, have you ever watched a movie years later and it registered on a completely different level for you, for better or for worse? And then the inverse of it, One Dead Saint asks, what movie have you only watched once? Not because it sucked, but because it had such a profound effect on you. Anybody?
For the second one, those would be those various movies that are too uncomfortably true about the horribleness of human beings to each other.
What's that? I think Crash is that one for me. You watch Crash?
The one
it's called Crash.
I can't remember the one there was one that I saw that bothered me, that made me so angry, bothered me so much that I purposely tried to block it out of my memory forever.
So you don't even know what it is.
I don't even know what it is anymore. And ever since then, I've actively avoided at all costs any kind of movie that could possibly do that to me again.
Yeah, I generally just watch movies that are enjoyable now.
Yeah, because the world is shitty enough. I don't need to go watch fake shittiness.
Yeah, I watched the movie Crash, I think when I was in high school. And man, that wrecked me for like 3 days. It's just... And there's nothing paranormal about it. Nothing. It's just a movie about some people going through various discriminatory and institutionalized other bullshit and their dealings with it. And that was a lot. There's a lot to deal with. So Crash is one for me.
I know one.
What's that?
And I think you forgot about it, Sam.
Don't tell me. I don't want to remember.
I can't remember the name exactly. I think it's called Imagineers or something.
I think we started watching it, but I stopped watching it.
No, we watched it. It has Zach Galifianakis in it. I think it's from like 2007.
No. I think what happened, we found it, and I was like, this looks interesting. I watched the first couple minutes of it, and was like, fuck this, and I bounced. And you finished it, and then you told me about it later.
Yeah. So this movie, here's the thing. I don't know if it was good. I don't know if it was bad. All I know is that I watched it, and at the end, I was kind of like, huh. And then over the course of the next 24 hours, I just kind of like fell into a weird depression. The movie, like the premise is basically that society is generally kind of as it currently is, with one major difference, which is that people sometimes just explode.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I remember,
Yeah, so-
remember the trailer. Yeah.
So the general vibe that I got from the
Wait,
movie,
is this a
and
comedy? What is it?
I don't know what it is.
It's actually like dark as fuck, if I recall.
Yeah, and so a lot of sort of the way that people go about living their lives is to try to minimize the chance that they will explode. But nobody truly understands what it is that causes people to explode. And so most people kind of land in this really, really dissatisfying existence where they just try to avoid getting emotionally invested in things, and they try to avoid like taking risks and getting excited and feeling things and whatever, and they just try to like land in a weird sort of, you know, dead end desk job or something and just cruise on that until they die without exploding. But still, those people also explode, but they stick to their guns and they keep doing it anyway.
So it's really just a kind of a more immediate
Death
thing about just
scenario.
death in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I don't know. It was a movie where it kind of forced me to think about it, but in ways that I couldn't understand. It was more of like an emotional thinking. Like I just felt a lot of weird stuff after watching it.
All right. What about Alan Falcon's question? Have you ever watched a movie years later and it registered on a completely different level for you?
I'm gonna say definitely. I'm having trouble coming up with.
I can come up with one, which is Office Space, where when that movie first came out, it was like 1999 or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's an old one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was, in middle school. I was a young chid, and at the time, it was just this hilarious comedy. With all these quirky characters and whatever, but the older I've gotten and the more that I've sort of interacted with the corporate world, the more I realized that it was just a documentary.
Yeah,
and it's really like that
like
just,
it actually had a lot more truth in it than
it should have. I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't a comedy so much as it just sort of captured a fairly close picture of how work is for most people. And it scares the shit out of me, Like I try to do everything in my power to avoid landing in that kind of scenario.
Yeah, mine is
so went from a comedy to a horror movie.
Yeah, mine's kind of similar actually. In that the first viewing was just pure entertainment, and then the second one was a bit deeper and different. It was actually the Avatar movie, not the terrible one with the whitewashed airbender.
Oh, okay.
That situation that happened, but with the actual Avatar movie
giant epic. Yeah,
what Cameron, Dave, whatever his name is, did. And I think the reason was like the spectacle of it the first time was just so amazing because they built this whole world, and like really, really thoroughly, and just watching that whole thing was just. I remember just being so fucking amazed. I think I watched that movie 3 times within a week of it coming out. I was like, I just wanted to go be there some more. And it's like a 3-hour movie or something, isn't it? 2.5 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then I watched it again about 3 months ago, and it hit me on just a totally different level where it wasn't about the beauty and the spectacle of the whole thing. It was
about
actually
the
just
shittiness of people.
Yeah, just the general message they were saying where they're like, look, you can't just blow up everything all the time. Cut it out. Guys, quit driving your corporocracy into the core of the world and destroying everything.
It's sort of like it's kind of it just captures very dramatically the end result of what companies do, because companies can't have ethics because they're not people.
Right.
And so that's the consequence of just a company doing its thing without people ethically steering it
is that the world tree gets destroyed.
Yeah, the world tree gets destroyed. So if you're running a company, just don't be an asshole, which I guess mostly means don't be a publicly traded company, because then you can't help it.
Well, the thing that kind of bothered me too about this is something that I always think about, because movies, stories, books, they always have endings, right? But nothing in life actually has an ending that wraps up.
Yeah.
Things just keep going on, right? So I always like to do the thought experiment. Like even if individual people stop going on, things just keep happening, right? Like things just keep happening. So I always like to do the thought experiment of like what happens after the ending of a movie. And the thing that bothered me about Avatar was the obvious next step is that this company is going to
Come back
bring
in
in
fuller force.
nuclear weapons, right? Like they're just going to be like, all we need is the shit that's underground.
Yeah, so just nuke the surface.
Let's just fucking take a 2-year breather, stockpile a bunch of weapons, because they already were, you know, contracting these mercenaries and military forces and stuff. It stands to reason that they aren't above just using insane destructive force to get the stuff they need. So yeah, I don't know. Isn't there an Avatar sequel being made now?
I hope so.
Who has
'Cause
their
I think
goddamn
that
cell
would
phone
be-
on?
That's Seth's fucking phone on the other side of the room.
Seth, goddamn it.
When we first started the podcast, I felt my pocket and I was like, "Oh, I guess I don't have my phone. That's good. It won't interrupt the podcast."
Instead, it's interrupting it and cannot be stopped.
All right, let's
Yep.
get this whole chunk out.
Nope, it
Anyway,
just
I'm
is
just
what it
gonna-
is. This is just part of the
I'm-
It is.
experience. Seth just
I'm
ruined it
afraid-
for everybody.
Great job, Seth.
It was a new experience, and now we're all going to remember it, and our lives have been made longer.
That's right. Making your life longer one day at a time with Seth's ringtone.
Although you really,
Butterscotch shenanigans.
I think this is a good time to say, we've all got cell phones in our pockets, and the best thing you can do for your entire being as a human is to make it so that it can't tell you when it wants something. Just mute the fucker, and then just look at it every once in a while when you're ready to make
You
decisions
tell
if you need to.
it when you want something.
Yeah, it's like language again, right? It's a tool for you to use, not vice
Yeah, but
versa.
the problem is when you have people in your life who still use the phone to make calls.
Just call them back when you're
You've got
ready.
that. That's true.
That's
Or
what
just
I
tell
do.
them to stop it and then revert to a fax machine.
You guys ever have the thing when you send somebody a text message and then instead of responding to the text message, they call you?
Yeah.
What's that about?
That's a story for another time.
Although
Seth,
I'm
'cause
still
we're out of
mostly
time.
confused just about text messaging because, you know, it's really the worst of all possible systems. Just send me a
All right,
goddamn
guys,
email.
We're going to have to table this till tomorrow. Keep your rage under control.
Okay, fine.
Final announcement. We're going to be at Indie PopCon. We're actually going to be there. We got a hotel for real. I'm pretty sure. So come see us at Indie PopCon. Just Google it to look up the dates and times and get a ticket. We'll have some t-shirts and stuff as well there and maybe some posters. Who knows? It'll be a fun party. And other than that, this has been Coffee with Butterscotch. Thanks for
Yeah.
listening.
Wait,
All right.
normally somebody was supposed to say bye there, and then none of that happened.
Seth just yelled, yeah. So it is what it is. We'll just
We'll
cut it
see you
off.
guys next week.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.